Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1500 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. Today I'm going to show you how I crushed the Caro Kann. I love playing the Caro Kann with black, but I have an incredible opening that I love to play against it with white. I think I currently have maybe 50 games in it with something like a 70% win rate, which is nuts. So we'll see if my opponent ever decides to play d5, but it is the Panov Attack, which I probably have somewhere in the title. And the Panov is great because, I mean, the point is that we take on d5, so I can pre-move that. And so we take on d5, we go c4, and we basically take the Caro, like, away from what is typically a Caro, if that makes sense. In a normal Caro Kann, white might play something like e5, and black will be the one attacking the center with the strong, like, pawn on e6 most likely. Good light squared control, closed position. Here, though, we make the game way more dynamic and open, which takes lots of Caro Kann players out of their comfort zone. My opponent goes pawn c6, which is... Sorry, not pawn c6, pawn g6, which is definitely a weird system. So, normally knight to c6 or knight to f6 is played. Of course, we can take on d5. It's not a great idea for black to take on c4 because we'll develop our bishop with tempo, bring the knights out, get castled, makes our life very easy. So g6 is intended to fianchetto the bishop very quickly, which is just a good thing for black to do in these systems. That's what I do, but in a slightly different move order when I play the black side of this, which you can find on my channel, how I like to play against the Panov. But I think knight c3 is probably the way to go. Bishop g7, we can just take the pawn on d5 with, I mean, very few consequences, probably. E6, maybe you can play e6 and then win back the d pawn, potentially. But I can probably also just take with my c pawn, which happens a lot in these g6 lines. There's in a lot of lines in the g6, like Panov, black sacrifices the d5 pawn, like this. And of course, we have doubled isolated pawns on the d file. We're up a pawn. But they control very important squares, so they're still very good pawns. So, okay, knight to f6. I don't like to play knight to f3 in a lot of these lines because bishop g4 I find incredibly annoying to deal with. So I often like to go bishop to g5 and try to get black to commit to e6 first. If bishop g5, bishop g7, we could technically, like, take and take, but I'm not sure that's the best way to go. Taking isn't the best. Normally you want black to take you, or you want to push c5 at the correct moment. Again, knight f3. If bishop to g4, I have a feeling we can go queen to b3. So I think I'm going to go for that. Because, yeah, bishop g4, queen to b3 looks very strong. Going after b7, applying more pressure to d5. And if take... Can we take here? Take. That looks pretty nice. Does look pretty nice. We could go queen to a4 check. And if queen d7... No, that's not so good. I think queen b3 is the idea. And I mean, even if these pawns get doubled, I don't think it's the end of the world. There's a lot of lines where this diagonal becomes very weak for black as well, especially because he's spending a good bit of time to develop his king side and get castled, right? It's kind of delaying his king's safety. The bishop is fantastic on this diagonal, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I play a similar system with black, although slightly differently. because this bishop is so strong on this diagonal. But I'm not sure this is the right or best way to go about it. I think it might be better for black just to go bishop g7 here and get castled as quickly as he can. So queen b3. If bishop takes f3, of course, if we take back, then I'm struggling to see how we gain an advantage, right? So I'm thinking if bishop takes, then we should take on b7, right? Threatening the rook. Now, if a move like knight b to d7, then we take the bishop and we're up a pawn, and that looks all very good, right? Of course, our pawns kind of suck, but we're up a pawn and we have a lot of pressure on the black position. Something like bishop to g7. We could even just nab another pawn on d5. And yeah, I know our pawns would be absolutely horrific there in terms of their structure, but I think it should still be fine. If bishop takes f3, queen takes b7, what I'm more so thinking about is a move like d takes c4, opening up the bishop's attack on the queen and defense of the rook. So bishop f3, queen b7, d takes. I'm not sure exactly how we follow that. All right, he goes for this, though. This seems very wrong. This seems very wrong, b6, because look how weak this diagonal is now. We have a few options. I mean, firstly, we could take on d5, which is just a free pawn. Again, I think he probably takes bishop b5 check, knight bd7 take. We're up a pawn, but can we do better than that? Well, my second idea is knight to e5. Now the bishop doesn't pin the knight to the queen because our queen is on b3. So knight to e5 hits the bishop. We're not threatening to take it because it's defended. So, you know. But we are controlling these squares, and you can see how this diagonal could become very useful. So something like knight to e5, bishop g7. Could we take? We could take the bishop. Knight takes. Then knight takes on d5. Very complicated, though. Very complicated. Other options? Not sure if we have many other options. It seems like we either take or we play knight to e5. We could take here with the knight, but I think that only helps black. Because if these knights get traded, then it just opens up the bishop. Right? So either we take with the pawn and bishop g7, or we take with the knight, he takes, I take, and then bishop g7. The only difference is that this bishop is open. And also, I don't want to trade pieces for the sake of it, right? My knight is quite a good piece. I mean, so is his, but again, all it would do, the trade, would be open up his bishop. If take, bishop g7, then we can probably give the check followed by knight e5. That looks very strong. So I think I'm more concerned about bishop takes. I can throw in the check. Knight b to d7. Take. Bishop g7. I think that should be good. I'm going to do it. Like I said, I know my pawn structure is going to get pretty destroyed. But castle and kingside should still be quite safe, I think. Okay, he takes. We could take and then go bishop b5. We could go bishop b5 immediately. I think either way we're going to play this move, so we might as well do it now. Of course, the bishop can't come back to defend, so he's going to have to block with one of the knights. Makes the most sense to block with this knight, because it's not developed yet. And also, if we encourage this, then it takes pressure off of d5, because the queen can't see that anymore. So let's take on f3. We are up a pawn with the strangest pawn structure in the world, but I wouldn't be shocked if this is a good bit better for white. This is just the nature of the Panov attack. It's very, very strange. Very strange. Okay, now, how should we continue? How should we continue? Well, of course, castles is the first move that comes to mind. Our king looks very open, but I think it should be okay. We can always bring this bishop to g3 if we need. The second move that comes to mind is bishop to f4, just developing the bishop. Castles. Maybe we can go queenside, but it feels risky. with the open c file particularly, and this bishop being very powerful. Bishop g5 puts pressure on the knight, but we're not really threatening anything. I think I'm just going to castle. And like I said, I think my king should be safe enough. Okay, my opponent castles. Now his knight can move, but it's got nowhere to move to. If I move like a6, I can always go bishop c6, so that's not a problem. Suppose we should just develop, really. Bishop to f4. If knight to h5, hitting the bishop and hitting d4, then probably we just go bishop... No, not e5, sorry. The knight can see that. We probably have to go back to e3 to defend. Oh, maybe that was a little bit inaccurate. I might have rushed that decision a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I want to play a move like rook e1. Okay, well, let's drop back. Make sure this is nicely defended. We still have good pressure on this knight. The queen can't really move too much. If the knight comes to f6, then this knight is kind of out of the game. I can't really attack it because I don't have a g-pawn, but it's still out of the game. So that's a good thing, of course. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. And yeah, so as I said, bishop c6 meets is what we're going to play if a6 is played. Just locking in the d5 pawn, hitting the rook, keeping pressure on the knight. I don't see a reason not to play that. Like I said earlier, in the Panov, a lot of the time you will get these doubled pawns on d4 and d5, but although they're doubled and isolated, they control very useful squares, like super useful squares. They dominate, and if black tries to break in the center, of course I happily will trade one of the pawns off because they're kind of weak, but we're doing a good job at defending them as well, and it's unclear how black applies much more pressure. It's also unclear how black continues his development. I mean, a move like rook c8 doesn't seem to do much. Yeah, he goes knight d2 f6. This is well defended, though. I might even throw in bishop c6 for the heck of it, just hitting the rook. And ensuring this is very well defended. It's now defended 3 times. It's attacked twice. So I could also maybe play a move like queen to a4 next, going after a7 and defending d4, because the queen no longer needs to defend d5, because the bishop's doing that. So, you know, this is very much a dynamic opening from the white perspective. If we were to go into some kind of endgame, black is probably drawing, or maybe even better, just because of how bad our pawn structure is. But the point is that we play around the pawns. That's the point. We're playing around our weak pawns, but they take up some important squares, like c6, which allow our pieces to... which allow our pieces to get into good positions. So, I mean, like, the question is, how does black defend a7, you know? If a move like queen to c7 is played, then we can probably just go knight to b5, kick the queen back to b8, and win a7. If rook c7, the rook is actually just trapped after knight to b5. If pawn to a5, you can do that, yeah, but I can probably go queen b5, applying pressure to b6, maybe knight a4 in the future to really go after the pawn. It's just very, very uncomfortable for black. After a5, I could just play a move like rook a to c1, rook f to e1, get on the open files, and again, work around my d-pawns. Now, obviously, if this pawn was back on g2, I would say this position is unequivocally better for white, like much better for white. But being up a pawn with 2 sets of isolated doubled pawns, a little bit trickier. However, we should be okay here. And now my opponent needs to make a decision. How does he defend this a7 pawn? He doesn't have rook a8. He doesn't have rook c7. He doesn't have queen c7. So I think the only move is a5. But obviously that's going to weaken the b6 pawn for the future, which is why I played queen here. Whoa. Well, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. Knight b5. Is he trying to do this? I don't think you can do that. I can just take that. And if you take, then I'll take. Maybe you want to do this? Maybe? I don't know. This doesn't look right. This does not look right at all. I mean, the only way to justify this is knight takes d5. That's the only way to try and justify this position. And after, like, knight c7, knight e3? Even then, that looks horrible for black. At the very least, I'm going to go up an exchange here. And if I give away the d-pawn, I don't care that much. Because it's a doubled isolated pawn anyway. You know, it's really not a big deal at all. So, yeah, this looks very, very suspect for black. And these knights aren't doing that much. I mean, this knight looks kind of nice, but it's also just dominated by my bishop and my pawns. Like, it can't get into the position. What black would love is if he could have only one knight and it be the f6 knight, obviously without being down a piece. These are kind of known as superfluous knights, where they both want to do the exact same thing, but they can't, right? They're like tripping over each other, basically. He would love to trade off one of them to bring the other one here, but the issue is only one of them is doing anything, and the other is just waiting for the other one to move, if that makes sense, right? So when your opponent has superfluous knights, typically you don't want to trade a pair of knights. You want to just leave them on the board, not doing anything and wishing that there weren't two of them, if that makes sense. It is definitely restricting the black position and making it difficult for him to fight for the center, because one of his knights is just on the edge of the board doing nothing, you know? Maybe it poses some attacking threat in the future, but I don't think so. Okay. Pawn e6. Well, I mean, we can just nab this, can't we? I could take as well, but I don't really want to open up the f-file. Also, I would be losing my bishop, so that's probably that's probably the bigger deal there. I'd love to play d6, supported by the knight, but, you know, it just hangs the bishop, unfortunately. So let's just take that. Queen takes. We could take on e6. As I said, f takes. I don't know. Opening this up seems a bit foolish. This knight could come into f4 now, because the queen is helping. So we have a few options. We do have to be careful we don't allow black some checkmating attack, because we may be up an exchange and a pawn, but the game is not over. We still need to try to be as accurate as we can. So rook a to c1 looks very natural, lining up with the queen. We don't have any good discoveries, really. Yeah, we don't really have any good discoveries. Maybe we have something like taking and then going bishop d5. Maybe. If rook here, knight here. Is there a threat? I don't think there's actually a threat there. I mean, if knight h3 check, king g2, or even king h1 should be very, very safe. Yeah, that looks fine to me. I reckon rook a to c1. We could maybe even lift the rook up to c3 to help with a third-rank defense if we need it. But I think it makes sense to try to keep the pressure on the queen side here, because clearly black has a lot of pieces on the king side. Not many on the queen side, though. And we're up an exchange and a pawn. Again, our extra pawn is not particularly impressive. Black's structure is much better than ours. But we have the extra exchange. So let's get our rook into the game with rook to c1. a7 is still weak. Don't forget about that. If you take on d5, then I could take back with an attack on the queen. So something like this, queen d6. Well, no, I don't have that because of that. So let's not be hanging pieces. Take queen d6. Maybe bishop to e4 makes sense, offering this trade to fix my structure. That looks logical. It probably makes sense for me to go king h1, rook g1 at some point to hide my king away and get my rook on the g file to stop any incoming attacks and maybe even counterattack. But yeah, if e takes d5, I don't really see a better discovery than just taking back. In a way, rook ac1 is defending d5. Like I said, I don't really want to take because I'm just opening up the f file for him. Okay, queen d6. Queen a3 looks very natural. Trying to insist on a queen trade. I know I can take a7, but there's no rush. This is an interesting looking move. If his queen goes back to c7, well, then I have d6. Oh, yeah, d6 is the idea. Ah, d6. Yes, yes, yes. And then black is going to be completely busted. Now, he could take and give us 3 sets of doubled isolated pawns, which would be pretty hilarious. But it's not going to be enough. Because at the end of the day, my rook is going to get to c7 if he trades the queens off. And his pieces are going to be way too passive. Like, again, the superfluous knight. Well, the superfluous knights, the bishop, the rook, they're all, I don't know, they look nice, but they're not really doing a whole lot. So if he were to trade and try and, I don't know, do something like this, you can do that, but like, d4 is protected. Your knights have no way into the position. Like, they just can't move. And if, like, take, knight takes, trying to trade off one of the superfluous knights, take, rook c7, I mean, you're just busted. Rook to a8. Yeah, it's not enough. And the thing is, if he moves his queen, where does he put the queen? Like, d8? That's very passive. And I'm just going to go pawn to d6. And now I'm the one attacking. So I'm happy with the queen trade because I'm up, again, an exchange and a pawn. This is why I love the Panov so much. I love the Panov. It, again, just takes players, Caro Kann players, out of their comfort zone. Because this is not how the Caro Kann normally goes for black. The Panov is like its own thing. If you play the Caro Kann, you have to play like completely differently against the Panov compared to like every other variation of the Caro Kann. Like things like the advanced variation, the exchange variation, the fantasy variation, they're all relatively similar because black's main c65 pawn structure mostly stays intact. Obviously, in the exchange variation, normally the pawn comes to e6 at some point. So you still have that light squared central control. But in the Panov, that's not how it goes. Let's go rook f to c1, activating our extra exchange. Again, the knight can't get involved. This bishop can't really get involved. The knight, even if it comes back to f6, can't get involved. Our doubled pawns, they're actually not that bad because they can't be targeted, right? It'll be interesting to run this through the engine after the game because I'm not 100% sure on the way that I handled the opening with the knight f3, bishop g4, queen b3 line. But it felt right. It felt right to me because normally bishop g4 you meet with queen f3 and you allow the doubling of the f pawns because you get such strong play on the queen side. That tends to be how that goes and how the computer likes you to play. Now, what does rook f to c1 achieve other than just putting my rook on the open file? Well, rook c8 is the idea. I'm going to force a trade of rooks, and then I'm going to pick up the e7 pawn. Then I'm going to pick up the b6 pawn. Maybe I even pick up the d5 pawn. Who knows? But yeah, rook c8. I'm sure I could play a move like rook to b7 and double up on the c file and win all the kingside pawns. I'm sure I could do that, but I don't need to do that. I can just do this. And you can win a3. I'll win a7. You can do that. I'll go a4 to stop this pawn from moving. And now how are you going to defend this? You can't use c5 either. So my next move is going to be rook to b8 most likely. If you go bishop d6, rook a6, bishop c7, rook a7, bishop d8, rook to d7. I'm going to kick your bishop out eventually, or I'm going to win the d5 pawn. Black doesn't have enough. His pawns are way too weak. f5? Okay. Trying to play f4. That makes a lot of sense. It's an interesting idea. What if I play f4 myself? Well, then your knight gets into the game, so I shouldn't do that. If I go bishop to g5, then I weaken d4. Okay. So what if I just go... what if I just go rook to b8 and allow f4 and then just move my bishop? Your knight still doesn't have a way into the game. Don't be too quick to react to moves from your opponent. Whoa, sorry. Don't be too quick to react to moves from your opponent. Like, we don't necessarily have to respond to the move f5. So, okay, now if we take f4, bishop c1, bishop to c3, going after d4, looks like it works, except we have bishop b2, because the rook supports that. So, yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Let's take. We still got to be, you know, a little bit careful in these positions. We don't want to allow counterplay unnecessarily. Knights, of course, can be very tricky. But my thought process is, if we win this a5 pawn or the d5 pawn, we get a passed pawn and the game is basically over, because my rook will dominate his minor pieces and my bishop just holds everything together. That's what it needs to do. That's all it needs to do. I can also bring my king into the game very easily if I want. Okay, he plays that immediately. That's a good idea, because now f4 is actually a threat, because if I move, then you'll take straight away. So I'm tempted to just go rook c6, hitting the bishop. Yeah, I think I like that. Rook b3 is also a move, but we're going to go rook c6. Just because I like having access to all of these different squares. Okay, bishop goes back. Well, now there's no threat, because this, you can't come here. Okay. I think I might retreat my bishop anyway, though. Just so that this doesn't come with tempo. And the question still remains for black. How is he going to do anything? Maybe I play a3 to kick the bishop away, because it can't enter the position. If he goes to e1, I'll just go king f1 and trap it. We're also still preventing knight to f4. If pawn to f4... Again, the knight has no way into the position, because we're controlling these squares and taking away the d5 square because of his own pawn. I suppose the idea for black is that I can't get to d5 just yet. Although even if I could, you would have knight f6, but then I suppose I have bishop to g5, and I would be taking the knight away and then winning d5. He's very low on time, though, which makes it even harder for him to defend. But these are the kinds of endgames where you do still need to be very accurate. Okay, that's a free bishop. And my opponent resigns, yeah. That was a little bit nice. But, yeah, you still have to be very careful in these endgames. Because, you know, for example, if we mishandled the position, after f5, let's say we played f4. We're still winning. But after a move like knight to f6, the knight is actually quite strong, you know? Like, the game, there is still stuff to be done. Let's say rook to b8, going after the pawn. I don't know, knight in, take, bishop to b4. It's not quite as clear how I win this. Like, this is defended, the knight is very strong, my bishop can't really move. I'm still completely winning, of course, but I'm allowing activity from black that I don't need to allow. the way we handled the position... Oh my god, my computer. Take this compared to this. There's a big difference. And the big difference is this knight is not in the game, right? And knights are tricky. You don't want to let the knights in for no reason. So let's jump into the analysis and see what the computer has to say. Hopefully I've also convinced you to try the Panov out for yourself. I've got quite a few other videos on my channel of me playing the Panov, so you can check those out if you're interested. But first, let's see what the computer has to say. Okay, that was a super accurate game. 93.3% accuracy, which is very good when you consider the game was 31 moves in total. My opponent with 83.7 also played very well. But let's jump into the analysis. So we have the Caro Kann. Like I said, I love the Panov Attack. It just takes Caro players out of their comfort zone completely. So c4. Personally, what I like to play with the black pieces is like knight to f6, knight to c3, knight to c6, and after knight to f3, which is the main line, I like g6 here. For black, if bishop to g5, this is what I play with white against this line, then bishop to e6, and after a move like knight to f3, I like g6. And here you can see black is actually slightly better, if not equal. It's very, very nice for black, and I find these positions to be very natural to play. I score very well in them with black. But my opponent goes for the immediate g6, which is not quite as good. I go knight to c3. We could take immediately. And if queen takes, then knight to c3, we are definitely better. But black is not going to do that. He's going to go knight to f6 instead. And he's going to win this pawn back, and there's nothing we can do about it. And when the knight is on d5, blockading our isolated pawn, it's quite good for black. You want to control the square in front of the isolated pawn, so I don't really want to allow that. So I'd rather allow him to take me if he wants, and then after bishop c4, now we control the square in front of the isolated pawn. It's just a good rule of thumb. But knight f6, knight to f3. Computer prefers cd5, but like I said, I don't like this personally. There's also queen to b3, which is nice, but I also don't understand the point of the move if the bishop hasn't vacated the b7 pawn yet. I mean, sure, we're threatening to take. If take and take, we're doing incredibly well, hitting this pawn. If you take, then, I mean, you're completely lost. After bishop to e3, rook d1 on the way, the game is over. So you have to play e6. Now the bishop can't get out, and we're doing, very well. d5 is apparently the move. What's the purpose? Take, take. We're threatening this. Okay, yeah, you can't really defend that. Check. King f1. Bishop g7. Bishop d2. Threatening this, so castles. And then bishop b4. Very nice. But I go knight to f3. And I'm encouraging my opponent to play bishop g4, which I would probably assume is the most popular move in this position. Let me check this database. Oh, no, that's Master Games. Oh, no, I can't check it properly. The chess.com database isn't as good as the Lead Chess one. But I would bet bishop g4 is very popular here, and it's not very good. My opponent plays it. I go queen b3, and we sidestep the pin and create our own threats. So b6 is a mistake. You have to take here. And I was thinking about this line after queen takes b7. And I thought that, well, dc4 is interesting because it opens this up. But after I take, I was like, well, if take... Well, it hangs the rook, actually. So no, you can't do that. Knight bd7 is the only move. And then bishop c4, we are up a pawn here with, I mean, great looking position. I mean, like castles, castles, rook b1, let's say rook to b8, b3. I don't even know how black plays this. This looks terrible. Knight b6, bishop f4, rook c8, bishop a6. Yeah, this is very, very nice. The rook is actually trapped and has to sacrifice itself. So, Yeah, that's what I was expecting. My opponent went b6 though, and I couldn't decide between this and this. Now the computer prefers knight takes d5, which I couldn't understand because I thought we were helping black. Computer thinks knight e5 though, and if he takes, then the point is that we take with the queen. I didn't consider that. And then if this, we go d6. Bishop g5. Oh, wow, that's really nice. Okay. The other move was knight e5, which I was considering, but I couldn't... Wait, what did I not like about this? I think I thought that black could just ignore me and go bishop g7, which is the best move. And I'd calculated here. And after this, I thought black was okay. There's actually queen a4, which I missed. But cd5 is still good. Bishop f3 is the best move. Bishop b5 check is the best move. Knight bd7, only move. And g takes f3. So we are up a pawn with a very weird structure, but we have a massive space advantage. And we have good play around our isolated pawns. Bishop g7, castles is best. Castles. I'm going to go bishop f4, which is slightly inaccurate. Better is bishop g5. Why? If he does the same thing, which is an okay move, the point is... Well, there's rook f to e1, and we go after e7, or there's queen a3 going after e7. And then you have to do this. And then we have a similar position to the game, actually. Yeah, we could just pick this up if we really wanted, although it's slightly complicated. The take, if you take e7, that's very nice. But okay, bishop f4 is what I chose. Knight h5 is the best move, and I went bishop back to e3. I could have gone to g3, but I thought, well, why am I giving up a pawn for no reason? Let's just keep hold of the pawn. Knight d to f6 is the best move. Bishop c6 is the best move, hitting the rook. Rook c8. Computer prefers rook b8, but I mean, that's not very natural looking. Of course, you want to go on the open file, so rook c8. Queen a4 is the best. Very happy to have found that. Alternatives were like rook f to e1, which are also very natural. But then maybe e6 is annoying, and I can't take because of take. So queen a4 supports the bishop and attacks a7. Rook c7 is inaccurate. See, the computer wants e6 here, which is interesting, because I don't really want to take that and open this up, although the computer does think it's the best idea. If I take, then e takes, my bishop is under attack, and my only move is bishop b5, and the game is equal. So that was the best option, is e6. That's the best option. My opponent went rook c7, which is the most natural option. I thought a5 would be played, which is also a move, and it's better than what my opponent did. And I was like, well, queen b5 is a move, but we also don't have to do it yet. It's not going anywhere. Rook a to c1 is completely fine, which I think I was veering more towards one of these moves. And we just have very good pressure. Like, these pawns kind of suck. So we're going to win them at some point, and it's unclear what black's play is. If e6, now the computer thinks we can take and go queen c4. Going after this, queen e7. Rook fe1, king h8, bishop d2, and then how do you defend? Because you don't have this. Or do you? Because I can't take because of take. That is d5 though. Very complicated. And these complications are why Caro Kann players don't like the Panov, right? That's why I struggled as a Caro Kann player against the Panov for so long, because it is so dynamic and it feels unnatural for a Caro player. But rook c7, knight b5, hitting the rook. Pawn e6 is a mistake. The computer actually doesn't want to do this. It wants to do rook d7. And if we take, it thinks that the game is equal. After knight c3, queen h3. Rook fc1. What is going on? Rook d8. Queen a7, queen f3, queen b6, rook d6, check, bishop f8, Okay, it's changing its mind a bit. It's leaning more towards white. But if we go here, we're going to get stuck in a perpetual. So this is still... Yeah, we have to run over like this. Yeah. And then the only move is king d2. Otherwise, the game is drawn. So, yeah. e6, though. That's a very long line. But the point is, the black queen wants to get into h3. Here, though, we, of course, take... Wait, what was I... I thought that knight takes d5 made things a bit more complicated. This is what I was expecting. And I thought after takes, takes, black maybe had some play. But the computer says queen d1. I saw this move. Queen f5. Queen e2. And we're just up, what, a rook. And black just doesn't have enough. But pawn e6, I thought that made it more complicated. Knight c7, queen c7, rook a to c1, which is the best move. Queen d6, and here I find the best move, queen a3, which I was very, very happy with. Point being, if the queen retreats, then I wanted to go d6. The computer doesn't love d6, but this is what I wanted. Because I figured that we go d7, we can force some trades if we want, and this should make the game easier to win for white, because now we're up a clean exchange, and we trade off some pieces. My opponent takes, we take, knight d5. I'm happy to trade and lose a pawn, because we just invade, and there's nothing black can do. Rook c8 is the best move, but of course we could play a move like rook to b7 and try to double up. Or maybe this, but then this. Yeah, it just wants to trade. So rook c8, take, king g7, and we just go after the pawns. I thought it would be more resilient for my opponent to do this. And if I go for this to go to a5 to hold on to the pawn, I'd probably play a4 here, clamping down on b5. So my rook can go and do other things. Let's say knight to f6. Bishop f4 is very strong, actually. Yeah. If, like, king f8, bishop e5, knight e8, even if I go for something like this, you just can't defend. Your knight is completely dominated. So let's say f6, bishop f4, g5, bishop c1. There's just nothing you can do. But e5, a4, f5. I thought f5 was quite creative because it maybe poses some problems for us. I go rook b8, which is the best move. Bishop b4. I take bishop c3. Basically, we have to be slightly careful here because after f4, I'd realized that after bishop to c1, bishop to c3, I had bishop to b2. And I'm defending because my rook defends my bishop. So after the bishop goes back, then I just go after this. Knight f6. There's a3. Say the bishop goes back here. I'm winning the a-pawn. There's just nothing to be done. So bishop c3. I attack the bishop because if you go f5, then, I mean, this is very easy. He was trying to switch up the move order, which is smart because if I play a lazy move like a3, then f4 you can win the d-pawn, and I'm still winning, but black maybe has some play. But rook c6, kick the bishop back. Bishop c1, I like to get out of the way of this. Bishop c3, and then he resigned because he hung his bishop. But yeah, a very interesting game. Basically just sustained positional pressure, which is the nature of the Panov. I love it. It scores so well for me. And hopefully I can encourage you to give it a go. Because the Caro is a very good opening. You want to take Caro Kann players out of their comfort zone to beat them. If you want to see another game where I use the Panov Attack, then check out the video up here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.